What if the one moment you finally opened up to someone, the one moment you let your guard down and told the truth, was the exact moment that destroyed everything you spent years building? Not because you did anything wrong, not because you were dishonest, but simply because you trusted the wrong person with the right words. In a loud, gray industrial city where the air always tasted like concrete and machine oil, there was a man named John. He was the kind of guy America is built on: blue collar, no complaints, just showing up. For 8 straight years, he punched in at the same cement factory on the edge of town before sunrise every single morning. He'd splash cold water on his face, pull on that worn-out blue uniform that smelled like dust and hard work, and walk the same cracked sidewalk past the same coffee cart, past the same security guard who barely looked up anymore. Inside, the machines never stopped screaming. The bags never got lighter. The shifts never got shorter. John's hands were cracked, his shoulders locked up every night, and his lower back felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it, but he never said a word. He believed that honest work was its own reward, and that complaining was for people who hadn't seen real hardship yet. At home, he had everything that actually mattered. A wife who held the household together with nothing but determination, and a little daughter who would bolt to the front door. The second she heard his footsteps, throwing her arms around his legs, concrete dust and all, like he was the greatest thing she'd ever seen. Those 15 seconds every evening were worth every brutal hour inside those factory walls. John never thought about quitting, never thought about asking for more. He just kept going, the way good men do. At work, John had a reputation. Quiet, reliable. Never late, never dramatic, never stirring the pot. He was the guy supervisors pointed to when they needed someone steady. And because he spent so many hours inside those walls, sharing lunch breaks, swapping stories, grinding through long shifts side by side with the same guys, he naturally started to feel like some of those people were more than just coworkers. One of them was a man named Mike. Big personality, loud laugh, always asking about John's family like he genuinely cared. Over time, John let himself believe that Mike was one of the good ones. But bodies don't lie, and John's was starting to send signals he couldn't ignore anymore. The fatigue was different now, heavier, deeper. By mid-afternoon, his legs felt hollow. And by the end of a shift, his mind was so worn down he could barely process a full sentence. He wasn't bitter about it. He wasn't angry at the factory or plotting anything against his boss. He just needed one easier day. One shift where he wasn't hauling maximum weight so his body could catch up with itself. That's it. That was the entire extent of his frustration. A simple, quiet human need. One evening after one of the hardest shifts he could remember, John and Mike were walking out through the factory gate together, the sun already half buried behind the skyline. John stopped, breathed in the cool air. And for the first and only time, he said something real. He told Mike his bones were aching, that the loading work had started to feel like more than his body could handle right now, that he was thinking about asking the supervisor for just one day of lighter duty so he could recover. He wasn't threatening anyone. He wasn't talking about quitting. There was no anger in his voice, just a tired man being honest with someone he thought was safe. Mike put a hand on his shoulder, nodded slowly, and said he totally understood. That everybody hits a wall sometimes. John felt something loosen in his chest. Being heard, really heard, felt like setting down a weight he didn't even realize he'd been carrying. He had no idea that Mike's version of caring came with a price tag. The next morning during break, while guys were gathered around the vending machines, Mike leaned into the circle with that look people get when they're carrying something interesting. Kept his voice low, the way people do when they want to seem like they not gossiping, but absolutely are, and told a coworker that John was unhappy and couldn't handle the work anymore. The coworker's eyes went wide. Was John thinking about leaving? Mike shrugged with that dangerous kind of casualness and said it sure seemed like he was fed up. And just like that, with a shrug and a half sentence, the truth got its first crack in it. Tiredness became resentment. A request for one lighter day became a man on the verge of walking out. From there, the story moved the way rumors always move in closed environments, fast and hungry. Each person who passed it along added something, a little more urgency, a little more drama, a little more fear. By the end of the day, the story barely resembled what John had actually said. By the next morning, it had taken on a life completely separate from him. One worker said John was planning to quit and take people with him. Another said he was toxic, spreading negativity on the floor. A floor manager who was already stressed about his own position heard that John was becoming a disruption. And rather than ask John directly, because rumors are always easier than conversations, he passed it up the chain. Each level added another layer of panic and assumption, until by the time it reached the shift supervisor, the story was that John was actively turning workers against the factory. And when it finally landed on the desk of Mr. Henderson, the owner, a proud, high-strung man who already felt like he was fighting battles on every front, what he heard was rebellion. What he imagined was betrayal. Mr. Henderson didn't see a tired worker who asked for one lighter shift. He saw a threat. And he decided, the way proud men sometimes do when fear is driving them, that an example needed to be made fast. The next morning, John walked in exactly like he always did. Greeted the guard, punched his card, grabbed his gloves. He had no reason to think today was any different from the last 8 years of mornings. He didn't even make it to his work area. 2 security guards cut him off and walked him straight to the main office. And inside that office, without so much as a real question, he was accused of betrayal, of spreading poison through the workforce, of plotting against the company. John tried to stay calm, tried to explain slowly and clearly that all he had done was mention to a friend that he was tired and wanted to ask for one day of lighter work. But the decision had already been made before he walked through that door. His final paycheck was already sitting on the table. He was terminated on the spot, and his name was quietly flagged at other factories in the area. The kind of quiet blacklisting that nobody admits to, but everyone understands. He walked back out through that gate for the last time while the whispers followed him down the sidewalk. And then it got worse. Because once a rumor escapes a workplace, it doesn't stop at the fence. Stories started circulating in the neighborhood. People were saying John had been caught stealing, that he was dangerous, that something was seriously wrong with him. Every door he knocked on for work seemed to know something, or think they knew something, before he could even introduce himself. At home, his wife watched him shrink. His daughter stopped asking when he was going back to work because children feel things even when nobody explains them. Bills started stacking up. Savings ran out. And the man who had spent 8 years believing that honest work and honest living would protect him slowly came to understand how fast and how completely a single mishandled, misrepresented sentence can burn a life down. After weeks of sleepless nights and dead-end searches, John made a quiet decision, not out of anger, out of pure exhaustion. Before the city was fully awake one early morning, he packed a small bag, walked into his daughter's room, pressed a kiss to her forehead while she slept and left. He needed to go somewhere far enough away that his name was still clean. Somewhere no one had already decided who he was before he opened his mouth. Weeks after John was gone, a factory manager was reviewing old security footage for an unrelated issue when he started noticing John in his final days, just working. Head down alone, no side conversations, no meetings. No signs of anything the rumors had described. Just a man doing his job in silence. The weight of it settled into his gut like a stone. He went and found Mike and asked him directly, what did John actually say that day? And Mike, stripped of the audience and the moment, gave the simple, quiet answer. John said he was tired. He asked for one lighter day. When that truth finally reached Mr. Henderson, there was regret. Real regret. But regret doesn't rebuild what got destroyed. John was already gone. His locker was already empty. His daughter was already used to the quiet. And his name, that name he had spent 8 honest years protecting, was already just a cautionary whisper in a factory that never should have let him go. So hear us what John Z's story leaves behind. Not everyone who listens to you actually cares about you. Some people collect your words the way others collect leverage. And once something leaves your mouth, you lose all control over what it becomes. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only armor you have left. Because the world will rarely punish you for what you kept to yourself. But it will absolutely punish you for sharing the right truth with the wrong person. Choose carefully. Not everyone who stands beside you is standing with you.